Hello and welcome to Network Africa with me, Cynthia Rare. Now, Egypt is topping our news today, and unfortunately, it's not for good reason. Sadly, one person has been killed and 5 others, including policemen, have sustained injuries when 5 bombs exploded in Cairo today. According to the Interior Ministry, a bomb exploded outside of a restaurant in the residential district of Mbaba, killing 1 person and wounding 2 others. 3 other bombs exploded in the nearby mainly middle-class district of Mohandesin, and they caused limited damage to mobile phone shops, but no injuries were sustained by occupants there. Most of the worst in a campaign of bomb attacks in Egypt have hit the Sinai Peninsula. That's a remote but strategic region bordering Gaza, Israel, and the Suez Canal. But smaller blasts have become increasingly common in Cairo as well as other cities. There's been no claim of responsibility for the attacks so far, but last month, the Egyptian affiliate of Islamic State claimed responsibility for coordinated attacks that killed at least 30 security personnel in Sinai. Now, as Egypt continues to contribute its part in the fight against the Islamic State, the military claims that dozens of suspected Islamist militants have been killed in an operation in Sinai amidst reports of the kidnapping of a businessman in the region. Helicopter gunships killed 18 suspected militants after they destroyed 4 vans in northern Sinai. 20 were said to have been killed when the military bombed a residence, a school, and a youth center, where the suspected militants were gathering near the North Sinai town of Sheikh Zayed. Egypt's state news agency, MENA, also confirmed that unidentified gunmen kidnapped the local director of a water distribution company from his home in Sheikh Zayed. North Sinai is the epicenter of an Islamist militant insurgency that has killed hundreds of police and soldiers since then Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Sisi ousted Islamist President Mohamed Morsi in July 2013 after mass protests against his rule. The militant group Sinai Province claims attacks that killed at least 30 security personnel in late January. That's the worst anti-government violence in months. For more on the situation in Egypt, I'm now being joined live via Skype by the Voice of America's Heather Murdock. Heather, thank you so much for joining us again on Network Africa.
Thank you.
Now, there's been no claim of responsibility so far for these incidents, these bomb attacks, about 5 of them, but could this be a retaliation for the airstrikes in Libya by the Islamic State?
I think it's widely believed here in Egypt that it is a retaliation from the Islamic State or supporters of the Islamic State. If you remember, there are groups, militant groups here in Egypt that have previously pledged their allegiance to the Islamic State. However, the Islamic State is also the word that's on everybody's lips these days, and a lot of people are reminding each other that there has been political motivated violence in Egypt for the past 4 years regularly. So there are a lot of other groups that could be responsible.
Now, this incident is coming about 4 days since President al-Sisi addressed the Egyptian people, saying that despite the security challenges, that things were under control, basically assuring them of their safety. Now, what is the perception of Egyptians now that this has happened?
Some people are saying that this speech, followed by these bombings, indicates that this president, nor any other president in the world apparently, has demonstrated an ability to beat the Islamic State, to stop terrorism. Other people are saying that they actually appreciated this speech and expected continued violence, but they appreciated that the government is aware of the threat and is actively fighting the threat. And they'd point out that 4 days is a very short window of time between the assurance and the bombing, saying they couldn't really do much in 4 days, even if they planned to.
So what happens next? Should the government focus on activities more at home or airstrikes in Libya?
Egyptians are divided on this issue as well. Government critics are quick to point out that, and are a bit bitter about the fact that Egypt quickly avenged the deaths of 21 of their countrymen in Libya when so many other people have died in recent years from political violence. Others would say that the threat of the Islamic State is not just an Egyptian problem or a Middle Eastern problem. Almost the entire world is surely Egypt, being a neighbor of Libya, should be responding. Another thing that people are saying is that one thing Egypt should be focusing on is social issues like poverty, and saying, well, let's try to reduce poverty in Egypt so as to stop the spread of extremist ideologies.
Heather Murdock, the Voice of America's correspondent in Cairo, thank you so much for speaking with us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Now to other matters concerning security, but not in Egypt. Unfortunately, there have been mortar attacks on the Somali presidential palace in the country's capital, Mogadishu, and al-Shabaab militants in the country have claimed responsibility for the incident. Unfortunately, we cannot tell you how many people were harmed in the incident which occurred this morning. However, the al-Qaeda-affiliated group is one which was pushed out of Mogadishu by African peacekeeping forces in 2011, but has waged a series of gun and grenade attacks to try to overthrow the government and impose its strict version of Sharia law. According to the police, several mortars landed near the palace, but it was not immediately clear whether anyone had been hit. For now, the authorities are investigating the exact individuals who are behind the attack and where they fired from. Somalia is trying to rebuild after 2 decades of civil war and lawlessness, but persistent attacks like these in the capital have complicated that effort. The government is being backed by international aid aimed at preventing it from becoming a haven for al-Qaeda-style militants in East Africa. Now, every year, Somalis in the United States send hundreds of millions of dollars back home to help their families make ends meet. But that in February, the U.S. bank that handled more than half of these cash transfers to Somalia opted to shut down its services. That move has left Somali communities worried for their families back home, who are now desperate for new ways to get the funds. The Voice of America's Amy Katz has more.
Once a month for years, Ahmed has been coming to Dahabshil, a money service agency catering to the Somali community outside Washington. The taxi driver has sent $200 every month to his family of 8 left behind at home, but he couldn't this time.
Forget the medicine or, anything else. The priority is the food. If they don't get that money, they don't have a food. They don't have any jobs.
At the small money service business inside a Somali store, Hal Hassan, who works as a building concierge, couldn't believe what she was just told.
Why are they all closed? Why are they closed? Why?
After years of civil war and anarchy, there is no formal banking system in Somalia. So families overseas have to rely on informal money transfer networks known as hawalas to deliver cash to their needy relatives. Merchants Bank of California was the last U.S. bank to handle wire transfers to Somalia. In early February, they announced the service would shut down. The reason likely has to do with the U.S. fight to stop the flow of money that help funds extremist groups in the region, such as al-Shabaab. Census data shows that 80,000 Somali immigrants live in the U.S. A majority of them send money to their families in their impoverished homeland. Osman Yusuf manages the